I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. Hey, it's John. Welcome back to the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. This week, we're talking with Paul Kortman of Connex Digital. Paul helps businesses use Zapier and Airtable to streamline their products and deliver better customized products internally. So if you don't know, Zapier is a product that allows you to connect your digital services to each other. Basically, you get to have the ability to connect these products so that you can get customized results from products that haven't been customized to your business. We had a lot of fun with this podcast. There is so much more that we could talk about, and that's why we're going to plan on having Paul back on a regular basis to help us understand how we can better utilize Zapier and even Airtable in our practices to get some customized results. Rather than spoil the fun, let's jump to that interview. Hey, 5-Star listeners. Before we start, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for small businesses with a specialty in working with solo and small law firms. I signed up with them within weeks of starting my firm because they are affordable for even the smallest solo practice. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in Spanish or English, screen and schedule new leads, and can even take payments. And now they're answering calls 24 hours a day. So even when you're asleep, they're still working. Even beyond the phone, they've got live agents and chat bots ready to capture leads on your website, by text, and by Facebook Messenger. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front line so you can work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $70 a month for calls and $100 a month for chats. Smith AI is offering a free trial, and our podcast listeners get an extra $100 discount code with promo code 5-Star. That's FIVESTAR. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Hey, Paul. Thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, John.
Of course. Paul, you're here because one of my favorite new programs since becoming a business owner has been Zapier, because it gets me able to do things faster and things that I don't want to do. And not only do I not want to do, I don't want anybody who works for me doing them either, because they tend to be the boring, repetitive tasks. And your job is to root out those tasks from other people and help them, basically automate things for other people. And so rather than have me talk about how we do it, because I'm the smartest kid in summer school there, I want the professional in to share exactly how it should be done.
Well, thanks for having me. And, it can be a bit of a misnomer. Zapier has an expert certification program, and I am certified as a Zapier expert, but I really don't like that term. A professional, sure. Expert, I don't know. I haven't run into a problem I haven't been able to solve yet, but I don't know. Does that make me an expert? We'll see. But yeah, seriously, Zapier for automation, and there are other tools available. We're going to focus on Zapier today, but we do, my staff, my team, and I work in other automation tools as well. But the big thing here is, what are repeatable tasks that we can automate? And that's what we're talking about today.
Right. And it's, in terms of the other ones, just to get some of them out of the way, the one that I know of is, I was just talking about with somebody on my staff, Microsoft Flow. They're trying to get in on this game. And
isn't that what Microsoft does?
Yeah.
They try to get in on the game. No,
sure.
I will say, it used to be called Power Automate. Well, no, I'm sorry. It's the other way around. It used to be called Flow, and now it's Microsoft Power Automate because it sounds so much cooler than Microsoft is flowing. But anyways, the benefit with Power Automate is that they're deep integration with Microsoft tools. So when you are working with Office 365, when you have everything in, OneDrive or whatever it's called, if you are a 100% Microsoft shop, then yeah, Power Automate is going to be a good thing for you because there are just some natural features that are built in. However, it's a bit of a hassle. It's not user-friendly. And I don't hate to say that. I'm just going to say the truth. It's not user-friendly, and it's a struggle. They're a follower right now. They're not leading the market space. They're trying to play catch-up, and so the user-friendliness just isn't there. Whereas companies like Zapier... companies like Zapier and others. I think you had something in your nose there. But, they come at this approach from the no-code approach or the low-code approach, which means, and this is kind of an underlying movement of everything that gets broader than what we're talking about today, but there's this idea of, well, yeah, what if developers, programmers could program stuff that us average people could use and connect things without having to know the code that works behind it? And Zapier did a much better job at approaching that. Now, there are even other competitors, Tray.io. If this, then that is considered a competitor. I think it's like comparing Matchbox cars to a Tesla, but it is still an automation tool. And there are other ones out there that I can't even think of right off the top of my head.
Right. But going back to your point of Zapier's the one that you like, it's kind of the professional grade version. I know I started fiddling with if this, then that, and it was good, but it doesn't have the business level integrations that Zapier does.
Yeah, and Zapier actually, their goal, the whole business goal behind Zapier is to make it so that anybody can use it. There was, when they first started this experts program and this partnership program with certified professionals, it was kind of a problem because they want to make it so that anybody can do this and doesn't need an expert. But at the same time, you have these really complicated workflows that not everybody can do. And also, you're running a business, you're running a law firm, you're running a consultancy. You don't need to be an expert in everything. You need to be able to say, okay, this is what I want done. This is the vision I have. Go do it. And so that's where Zapier has come of age now, and to say, okay, yes, we try to keep it as simple. They're priced appropriately, so they're as simple as they can be. But also, people can get started, can test things out. I still get frustrated because people come to it with social media in mind. Like, how can I auto tweet this and auto Facebook that? And it's like, it's using a jackhammer to put a nail into a wall. And it's like, you can do better. You can dream better. And so that's where I try to go with my clients. And for most people that have approached Zapier, just to give you an idea, you may have a 2-step Zap. When this happens in this application, I want that to happen in that application. I've built Zaps that have hit the limit, and I didn't find out that there was a limit until I built this, but there is a limit of 99 steps in a Zap. And so it's not uncommon for me to have 50 to 60 steps in a Zap. So that just gives you an idea of the complicated workflows that we work with.
Yeah, and I think that's right. You can start fiddling around with it to learn about it. We've got a few that I think get up to like 7 or 8 steps, but that's just kind of testing the limits of our ability to work with it. The reason to go grab more help is you want it to do even more, which is great. And again, we don't need to be the expert in all of it, but the complicated things, that's what you're here to tell us about. So we're going to get to those deep level secrets. I think we do need to define a little bit more, at least quickly, so everybody is on the same page. What is it doing and how is it doing it?
So the core, if you take the first letter and the last 2 letters off, the core of Zapier is API. There are these 3 special letters that are in the middle of there. And APIs are basically, like, let's just keep it really simple. It's a method of communicating with applications, with databases, with applications. So not every application out there has an API, but if an application has an API, that allows other applications to interface or to engage with that content or that application. So your audience may be familiar with Clio, they may be familiar with, say, JotForm or WebMerge or FormStack or these sorts of applications. And it's like, well, what if these applications could talk together? What happens is a company like JotForm builds their API and says, okay, here is how you communicate with us. And then a company like Clio builds their API and says, here's how you communicate with us. And now you're responsible for taking those 2 APIs and helping them to communicate together. Well, that's where Zapier steps in and says, you don't need to write custom code for that. You don't need to hire a developer for that. You can actually say, hey, when I get a new form submission in JotForm, create a new client in Clio. And, as they say, the rest is magic.
Right. I mean, the way I think about it, most of these online programs have some place to plug in. digitally, not actual cables, but a digital cable. Sometimes you're lucky and they've built the connection already. Like Clio Grow has the connection to Clio Manage, so you don't have to do anything through Zapier to get into there. It's already done for you. But most times you don't have that connection. And so that's where, because the two sockets connections don't work, you've got to find something that's got the connectors that are right for Clio Manage on one end and, for me, Basecamp on the other.
Yeah.
And
so
that's where
an adapter is where you were going with that is like, hey, you're traveling to Europe and you have a hairdryer. For me, for those of you who are listening to the audio, I'm bald, so I don't ever travel with a hairdryer, but you get the picture. My hairdryer is not going to fit into a European outlet. That's where you need Zapier to run that adapter in the middle that just says, okay, well, when this happens, do this over in this other application.
Right. So to start thinking about how we can use this, is it something that we want to have just random tasks going, or are we looking for specific processes that we're really dialing in first? Where do we even begin on this?
Well, as a small business entrepreneur, so I run a consultancy, I run a small business, so I have quite a few, ironically, I happen to have quite a few attorneys as clients, but I see, some similarities there, billable hours and projects and, some processes, some standardizations, but at the same time, you have to deal with every client is unique in their own quirks. So what we try to do is say, okay, well, what are the processes your business goes through? What do you do to onboard a new client? What do you do when it has to go to litigation? What do you do when it's this type of form that needs to be filled in? And if you can define a process, even if it's like, okay, well, but if it's in this case, then we have to do that. And if it's over here, then we have to do this. That's conditional logic within your process. But if you can define a process, then as long as there's an API available, as long as there's a connection to that application, then we can automate it. And so what we try to do is we take out potential for human error. We speed up the process by automating it using any one of the tools that are available to us so that we can say, well, when this happens, manipulate the data in this way, in this consistent way that follows the process every time and output something very consistent. So that's what we try to look for is, what is it that you're repeating? What is it that you're doing over and over again? Or what is it that you have to do, like, say, once a month, but it takes you 2 hours? And there's a lot of mistakes, but it's just button pushing and you have to follow this specific process. Well, let's automate that as best we can so that it saves you time, which we all know is money that can be better served elsewhere, but then also prevents that human error issue because I'm human and I make errors all the time. And so for me to have an administrator or an administrative assistant or even a VA and expect them to not make errors is, the definition of insanity? Like, that's just not going to happen. They're going to make mistakes. They're human. So how do we take that out of it? Because now we have these machines that can automate this, the computer revolution, shall we say.
Right. And so now I think we want to start talking about some of those wins that we can get for folks, to share some of the things that I've kind of muscled together for myself. One of the ones that I love is if you send an email to Zapier, you can start triggering things. And it's hidden in there. They don't make it, the email parser, it's not as easy as it should be.
Oh, are we going to go there? Do you really want me to go there, John?
No, well, look, it's also, if you're going to make it much easier for me, the great part for me is I can send an email or I can BCC an email address and then something happens. So the big problem I was having earlier on was people would email me and say, hey, I've got this client, or hey, I'm looking, so-and-so recommended you. I email them back or call them back, and then it just kind of disappears into the ether. Like, if I wanted to put them into Clio Grow, I've got to go over to Clio Grow and, do the quick intake and blah, blah, blah. But I set up a Zap where I've got one email address that I've named as a contact in Outlook that's new potential client, and it's got a totally gibberish email address at Zapier. But I BCC that, and then through the magic of Zapier, it winds up in my inbox as something to clean up. So at least that much, it hasn't disappeared. We can still track them in our process.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning on the parser, but I've been talking too long. You need to talk about parser.
So we'll just talk real quick because Zapier it can't be all things to all people, but it tries to do as much as it can. So they do have an app built in their system called Parser by Zapier. And so it's parser.zapier.com. And there are limitations there because it is free with your Zapier account. And so they're not ever going to become experts at parsing emails. And what I mean by parsing emails is, say you have a template, you get new leads from a certain source, and they only send it via email. They don't do it via webhook or API or directly into Clio or any other CRM. They just give you an email. We most often run into this in real estate, but I've seen it with attorneys before, specifically real estate attorneys. But they receive these leads and it's like, but it's a template. So I don't want to just copy and paste that user's name and email and phone number into Clio or into my CRM every time. Well, we can set up a parser. So there are 3 that I would look at. Your basic is Parser by Zapier. Your other 2 are Parser spelled wrong, Parseur, I think it is. And then the other one that I like because I can spell it is mailparser.io. And I'm not affiliated with any of these, but it's just that Parser by Zapier, you can do certain things like if you just want to get the attachments, if you just want to get who the email is from or whatever, you can pull that information. But if you're starting to have like, well, if there's a comment, I need it. And if there's not a comment, don't try to take it. That just goofs that system up really bad if the template is weird. So that's when I turn to mailparser.io. They also have a docparser.io, hint, hint, so you can parse documents. But with mailparser.io, you can set up a mailbox and then you can set up templates and be able to grab any information that's in that email. And then once you have that information, you put it into a Zap and then the world is your oyster. You can put that in your to-do list management. You can put it in your CRM. You can actually create PDFs with it. You can, create your final documents. You can do all kinds of things with that data. And really what it is it just scraped that out of your email because it found a template within your email.
Right. So the way I'm using Parser by Zapier right now is I just care about the text and the email. That's enough. Rarely am I doing more than that. Just because I just need to keep the text of the email of, hi, I'm so-and-so, this is what I'm looking for. They're not a structured email that a machine can run.
Right. But we could, so I'm going to challenge you on this. We talked kind of offline about, a live consult, but I'll challenge you on this. You can use that idea and then put hashtags or at symbols, at mentions in the first couple of lines. So like if you're forwarding an email, like the case you had talked about, you could BCC it to your Zap. Yes, that's one way to do it. But you could also forward emails. Say there's an email in your inbox that you need to follow up within 4 days and you want to assign it to one of your colleagues. Well, what if we built the template to check for at mentions and hashtags? And so if it's got this hashtag, then we put it over on this board. If it's got this at mention, we put it in this to do and assign it to that person. So there's a whole bunch of like conditional logic that you can build in and create your own email template. I put air quotes around that, but it's just the idea of like when you forward a message, like all machines, all computers work with standards. And so when you forward a message, you'll see this -- forward message, whatever. We can now template that. We can format that and say anything before that, let's look for at symbols and let's look for pound symbols and then take action based on that. What I like to do is just say, okay, what do you want to have happen? When you do this, and if this, then that, totally stole the whole concept, ifttt.com. But if I do this, then I want that to happen. That's conditional logic. And basically, if you can word something that way, when this triggers, when this domino falls, I want these dominoes to fall. Then if you can write it out or explain it that way, chances are we can automate it.
So the reason I use email, and this is where I'm going to kind of poke you for, is there a better way to do this? There's not a good start button for Zapier. Like there's not a place where like I'm thinking specifically of like the Amazon buttons where you can push a button and it orders a thing for you.
Like a dash button where
Right.
like you just have a, not true. And thank you for reminding me of that, because I'm like, there's like, why are you doing this via email? So there are multiple different ways, and Zapier is constantly working on developing other ways. They just released a new way last month, I want to say. So one of the ways is from your mobile phone. There's an app that you can download, and you can just say, start this Zap, and it will start that Zap. So there's one way. Another way is, if you're using Chrome as your browser, you can install a Zapier extension, and you can click on that extension and click on a Zap name, and it will trigger that Zap to start that. There are other ways that are a little bit more technical, of where you can have a webhook URL, a bookmark. I use this for myself. I have meetings scheduled with people in my calendar, and I show up to the meeting and they're not there. I don't want to sit down and write an email to remind them and all this. Like, yes, I'm waiting for this person, but I'm also like working on something else because I'm, multitasking. I don't want to have to go through the hassle of writing an email to somebody and finding their email address or whatever. So I have a bookmark that I click on, and it's called 5 minutes. Hey, they're 5 minutes late. I click on that. It goes, looks in my calendar, finds the person's email address, finds the Zoom link, and then sends them an email saying, I'm waiting for you in a Zoom meeting. Here's the link. And then I also have another bookmark that's 15 minutes that says, hey, you didn't show up. Please reschedule with me here. That's perfect for me because I'm sitting in front of my computer and I can just click on a bookmark and I don't have to do anything else. And it does everything for me. So I'm not sending an email or whatever. So just to recap, and then they also did a new one, which I'm not that familiar with. I haven't used yet, but it's integrated in your Gmail. So there is a Gmail extension for Zapier that now you can click on it and it will pull some data from your Gmail, whatever you specify. Oh, and one more thing that I forgot to mention is they're working on, it's in private beta right now. The Chrome extension, you can click on that and then click start the Zap, but you can have it ask questions. So like, what time, who, whatever. And so like there's this basic form you can fill in, or it can grab the URL of whatever page you're on. They have a new one coming out where it can modify content on a page. So bear with me here. This is less of a trigger and more of an action. This is something that happens, but it's a trigger in the background. Say you use Clio and another CRM like HubSpot. And while you're looking at Clio, you want to pull in their HubSpot social media stuff. That's this functionality, is that it can pull data from other apps and display it in your browser for that user. So when you're looking at that specific client's profile on Clio, it can have a block of HubSpot data or Twitter data or whatever data you want to pull. We see this most often in reporting and analytics. I want to, when I'm looking at this user, I want to see how many purchases they've made or what's their latest invoice. So we can pull that information from your accounting software and put that in there. So there are lots of different ways now that it goes way beyond just I send an email to start a process.
Right. I mean, so I want to go back to the bookmark. Is that a browser specific extension, or is that it'll give you a link and you just hit the link?
So it's a dirty little hack that, and I forgot to mention one of the other tools that we use to replace or to in place of Zapier is Integromat, which significantly more complex, but also with great power comes great responsibility. We can do more things with it. So what my bookmark specifically, because I'm a nerd, they just hit a webhook. And so I get a JSON message, which is nerd speak for code. I just get code in my browser and it just says success. I know, because I'm an expert, I know what that does and I know that it's working and I don't have to think about it. I wouldn't do that for a client necessarily. I would more along the lines of use a webhook at Integromat, which then I would fire off the webhook at Zapier. But the webhook at Integromat, I can actually control what the response is. And so I can put out a nice HTML message that says, hey, thanks for sending out a 5-minute warning. We'll take it from here. Thanks, Roger. And that sort of thing. So that bookmark is not like a Chrome extension. And that bookmark you can use from any browser, any mobile device. And if you just know, hey, this is just hitting a webhook as a trigger, Zapier always responds with success. Then as long as you know, then you're in a good spot.
Oh, that's amazing. One of the other things we talked about offline is the other 3-letter key that you wanted to get to was CSVs, which I know people get very nervous about that because CSV means you're probably opening in Excel. And if you're opening it in Excel, that means numbers, which means lawyers hate it.
Wow. The lawyers I've worked with, they love numbers when they're on invoices. But
Yeah.
no, the CSV stands for comma separated values. It's basically a spreadsheet. It's a structured data. And when you talk to an automator like myself and you say, I've got structured data, I've got a CSV, and I want to do, these 5 steps, like, for lack of better terms, that's a bit of a wet dream of just like, ooh, I can do anything with structured data. And so you give me a CSV and I can do magic with it. So oftentimes when we're looking at a business, a consultancy, a law firm, and we're saying, what processes do you do and how can we automate that? I will ask, are there any times you're downloading or exporting to CSV? And if they say yes, then I say, I can save you time, because whatever you're doing with that CSV, we can automate it. And sometimes with certain applications, we can automate the download of the CSV or the download of that data. So this is actually for one of my higher education clients. They have 2 CRMs that don't communicate well together. Or no, they have a CRM that doesn't give good reporting. And so they can automate the email delivery of a CSV from that CRM. There is no APIs to get into that CRM. But just as we talked about, once that email is delivered, I can then grab that CSV using Parser by Zapier or mailparser.io. I can grab that CSV, then parse that and do whatever I need to on each one of those records. And in their case, they're just reporting on it. So we're building out this pretty sweet dashboard that tells them every interaction they've had with a prospective student, how likely they are, et cetera, et cetera. So the reporting that isn't available in their CRM, we've made available thanks to the CSV processing.
Interesting. Yeah, but it's something that specifically for lawyers, we've got IOLTA accounts where we're responsible for what happens in that account. We have to check it. I mean, I've now got it to the point where I've got somebody on my team who deals with that account every week. So we're constantly looking at it. Clio generates those reports, but we can generate those as CSVs. He still needs to go through and make sure everything lines up on the back end, because not everything's going to always automate. There are weird things that don't work. That's what the humans are for. But taking out a lot of the process is like, it sounds like automate 12:01 Monday morning, run the report for the prior week, do some fiddling with that data, then save it here so it's ready and waiting for him. And he's at least taking a step or two out of that.
So I'm working with a couple other beta software developers or whatever that are at the intersection of human interaction and automation. And this is a perfect use case for that, of where we automate it to show up in a dashboard or in front of that user who then, checks the box, verifies, yes, this is okay. Yes, no, the number needs to be tweaked. And then they hit go, and then it does the rest of the automation. So there are tools that are out there, some of them better than others, but basically where you can have a human checkpoint, a human interaction in the middle of a process, in the middle of a workflow, so that data can be verified or manipulated as needed or as allowed, depends on, I am talking to lawyers, so you guys understand you shouldn't manipulate data, but depending on the situation, that line needs to be ignored, take that out, whatever. We can put those human interactions in the middle of a workflow. I've done it for a couple of different clients of mine that they're just like, yeah, but I want to review it. And then I want a button, and I'll put that in air quotes again. It's a link in an email that says, yes, approve. And then it takes that and goes and does the rest of the work.
Right. And so when you're downloading and manipulating that CSV, that's all happening, again, behind the scenes inside of Zapier. It's not, you don't have to upload it to anywhere else. You just give it the instructions.
Yeah. And depending on the client, depending on the app, depending on the situation, we have one client where that CSV is automatically emailed to a specific email address at 12:01 on Monday. And so that's just taken care of. They don't even have to do anything there. We have another client, they're like, yeah, we can't automate the exporting of the CSV. There's no way in this app, but we want to just drop it into Google Drive and then you take it from there. And so dropping it into Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, Box, And we can say, okay, when a new file shows up in this folder, then take it and process it and do all the magic behind the scenes. There, as with all of these, there's a little setup that's involved of like, okay, thinking through what are we going to do when this happens? But then also, there's edge cases of like, well, what if the file is done differently or whatever? And what do we do in that situation? You could spend days and weeks and months trying to come up with all of the edge cases. The cool part about Zapier and these other automation workflow tools is that you can get it set up and it will alert you when there's an edge case, when something breaks and says, hey, I didn't know what to do with this because it didn't work right. And then you can handle that and be able to modify for inexpensive, for not that much effort, modify your workflow to handle those edge cases. So if we take a step back 10 years, everything that we're doing right now, almost everything could be done. You would just have to hire a software development firm for $100,000 to build this integration. And now we can do it for fractions, like 10% of that, to be able to integrate apps and then be more agile in developing edge cases. And what do we do when this happens? And, oh, that works. I'm so happy you built that. Now I want it to do this as well. Well, then we can just iterate on that.
Paul, I think we could spend all day talking about things. I know we had a list of other things that we wanted to get to, but I'm going to respect everybody's time. We're going to cut it short here. I think we've got more than enough for the next time you come back because, right. There's so much we can and should be doing. Mm-hmm. If dear listener can't wait until then, where can they find you online?
So the name of my business is Connex Digital, and that's CONNEX.digital, and there's no .com. I'm one of those cool new businesses that just ends in .digital. So feel free to head on over to Connex.digital. You can book sessions with me directly there. I try to automate as much as possible, so you'll find forms that you can fill out there and get into our workflow. That's the best way to do it. Yes, I'm on Twitter. Yes, whatever. You can reach out to me there, but the best way is that if you have specific questions or specific needs, a larger project, feel free to email me, paul@connex.digital.
Awesome. Paul, thanks so much for being with us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcouncil.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcouncil.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.